Hey guys, welcome to the Home Assistant Complete Guide. This is Gio from Smart Home Makers, and let's roll the intro. What is Home Assistant? It's a piece of software that allows your smart home devices to talk to each other, and you can control them with dashboards and you can automate them with automations. That's in essence what it is. Why it's so popular? Because it's open source, it gets a lot of updates, it's local control based, and it integrates a ton of devices, and it has very powerful automation options. In today's video, you're going to see the timestamps of when I'll be talking about the things, but if you follow it in a sequential order, it will make all sense. I'm going to help you cut from some of the Home Assistant jargon. I'm going to keep it simple so that anyone that is looking into Home Assistant can approach it and can start. In the blog post, you're going to find the written version of this video, and you're going to also find the links that I'll be using in the video so you can actually follow through. Home Assistant is free to use, it's free to download, and you can download the apps on your phone and on your Mac and your Windows also, all for free. So that's great, but you're going to need some hardware. So you either install it on a spare laptop or spare Intel NUC or something that you have around the house, or you need to buy some dedicated hardware on which Home Assistant needs to be installed. DIY option where you buy your own hardware and you install it and you follow some simple instructions. So one of the most popular ways in the past with the Raspberry Pi or the Android option, it's not that terribly difficult actually to do. What you just need to do is an SD card, download this piece of software called Balena Etcher, and you can see from this screenshot over here, it's pretty much you would get the flash from URL option. You would copy and paste this URL into that URL. You would use the target SD drive in your flash, take the SD drive, put it in your Raspberry Pi, and then boot it up. You can also use the Home Assistant Yellow. Home Assistant Yellow is Home Assistant's version of hardware and software together, a little bit like the Apple experience. It's all in one package. It has some great things like the Zigbee module already integrated inside it. There are good features, and you can go and purchase this. Again, links will be in the blog post with the most recent prices. So you can go and buy that and make a decision of which option you want to go down. Once you have installed Home Assistant and you've picked your hardware, now in this next section, we're going to talk about what you need to do first as soon as you get it up and running, and how do you get to the point where you're going to start using Home Assistant to see if you actually enjoy it or not. I want you to go to settings, scroll and find areas and zones. Here I want you to create your areas. Your areas most simply are going to be your rooms in your home. If you want to, you can also create an outside area if you have some devices that are outside of the house. To create an area, click Create Area. Give your area a name. You can create an alias. In this example, it's useful if you're calling an area in two different ways. For example, you might call a living room a lounge. Upload a picture if you want to have it a little bit more appealing, like I have some examples over here. When we start adding devices into Home Assistant, you can assign them to areas. That's why we need to have the areas done first. Let's click now to devices and services. In devices and services, you'll be greeted by something like this. Your will be different. Everyone's will be different because it will depend on the devices that you have connected to your network or in the proximity of your smart hub. The blue dialog over here shows you something that's discovered, so this is new. So you could click continue and you can configure and follow the instructions on screen. Normally it takes just a couple of clicks to get them up and running. The red box over here is something that perhaps has been configured previously but needs to reconfigure it. You shouldn't have this just when you're starting out. But if you can't see what you're looking for, you can click Add Integration over here. You can either click this Add Zigbee device. This will bring you to this pairing mode where you can start putting your devices in pairing mode. It's very useful if you have things like car motion sensors. And most simply, you can just scroll down or just type in something in here to get your devices connected and up and running. If you want to find out more about the integrations, there's a dedicated integration page. You can see there are 2,447 integrations within Home Assistant, and you can just search for them again, like the Sonos one, and you can find out what are the features that are supported with each integration. So information about which sensors you might get, control features, some important notes of how things work, Also, you'll get to know if this is a local connection or a cloud connection. A cloud connection basically is slower and requires internet connection. So you would want to prefer a local one if you can. Sometimes some devices don't have that, and that's okay too, just that you're aware of that. So once you've got your devices configured, now you will notice you will have this dialog over here. You're going to have a situation, I'll zoom in a bit, where you have like one device and one entity. This is the most simple option. So you can click on the device. This will give you some information. On the right hand side, you'll see the logbook, which will tell you when has been turned on and turned off. In the center part, you'll get some controls, so you can control the TV, turn it on, and various other options. You have the device information, automations that you can create by clicking this plus button, and it will give you some suggestions of like, oh, when the TV is turned on, when it is paused, when it starts buffering, and it will create something like quite interesting. And you can also create scenes and scripts from the same dialog. You can click on the entity dialog over here, and you can get a list of entities. Entities are very important in Home Assistant. These are things that you will use many times over. You can actually also rename entities from the dialog over here, device, this cogwheel over here. Yeah, you can get the entity ID. You can also change the icon of the entity, which could be quite relevant. You might want to do this really at the beginning. So you'll want to rename your entity IDs. Come up also with a naming convention for your entity IDs. It will save you a lot of time at the beginning. Just to note that the entity IDs are all prefixed by something called the domain. And these domains are prescribed. They are predetermined things. So media players, lights, switches, sensors are like common domains, but they're like things also like cover. So I will show you some more devices. So you can see here we have examples of a switch. So a switch will work with the on and off device. The number is something like a specific number. So this is like the delay, audio delay, for example, in a Sonos device. So you can see, you can slide this across to change the value, and you can see the history of how this device was set. Sensors, binary sensors are basically off or on, so they have only two values. A sensor is similar to a binary sensor, but can have more than one value, so it could be like a temperature sensor. Entity IDs have two fundamental concepts: states and attributes. The best way to explain this to you is to jump into the developer tools. You'll find it right on top of the settings right here. If you click on the development tools and you go to states, you can actually access states and attributes of all of your entities. The idea of the developer tool is for you to explore your devices and for you to understand how things work. It's not there for you to control devices. That's why we've got dashboards, and it's not there for automations. That's why we have automations. So I can see the Elgato light that is just on top over there. We have the state. So the state is the first thing that you see, and that's either on or off for a light. And the attributes, these are the properties of the entity. The first part of the property, you'll see the description of it. So this is the minimum color temperature in Kelvin, and this is the actual value that this is assuming. So all of them are, we'd call these key pair values, and you can have as many attributes as you want, and they can be also nested. You can have attributes in more complex scenarios. So this is an example of how a light works. Now let's look at a sensor. Sensor here is the bedroom temperature. The state isn't an on and off, but it's the actual value of the sensor. And you can't really control the sensor. You can only read from a sensor. That's a really important concept for you to understand in Home Assistant. This third tab in the developer tools also really helps you understand how things work in the Home Assistant. There are things called services. Services are pretty much connected or coupled with the domain. So when I say domains, remember I'm talking about light, dot, switch, dot. So for each domain, you have several options. In this example for light, we have three services: a toggle service, a turn off service, and a turn on service. You can only control lights by using light domains. So that's a Home Assistant golden rule. When you click on one of these, you get more options. The service itself needs a target, and the target can be an area, it can be a device, or it can be an entity. And we talked about all three. So I hope at this point you know what they are. If you still don't, you can still comment in the section down below and I will go in more detail. We have some attributes that we can set. So we can set the color name, so we can change the name, the temperature, the brightness value, and a lot more. Toggle is basically going to just switch the current state of the light. So if the light is on, the toggle is going to turn it off, and if it's off, it's going to turn it on. So the toggle is the most natural behavior that most of us are used to with lights. The other two, and I'll just go back to them again, so lights turn off and turn on, are what they say they are. The difference with the toggle is that if a device is already on, the turn on is not going to do anything unless you specify, for example, a different brightness setting or different color, then it would adjust that. Now we have the fundamental Home Assistant concepts out of the way, and now we can focus on the two main things that really matter with Home Assistant. One of them is automating, which means that automatically controlling your devices without you doing anything. And the second one is more controlling devices, which means dashboards. These two are big topics in themselves. So in this video, to keep the guide nice and compact, we're going to be going through the essential knowledge that you're going to need to do 80% of what you need. Let's jump back to settings. Let's go to automations and scenes. Here we're greeted with the automation page. Your one will probably be blank. At this stage, we can add automations in basically two ways. We can either use the user interface, which is basically using this button over here, or you can use code YAML. You can basically do everything in the user interface. So there isn't really a reason to use YAML unless you want to copy code from places in the internet. So let's create automation. You'll have create automation here. I have extra ones from the community because I'm using something called blueprints, which are automation templates. Click create automation, and we have three fundamental blocks of an automation: triggers, conditions, and actions. Triggers and actions are both compulsory, so you need at least one for each, and conditions optional. The trigger is what starts the automation, the actions are the consequences, so the things that happen after the automations. The conditions are the things that need to be true for actually the actions to be actioned. You can have multiple triggers and multiple conditions and multiple actions in one single automation. To add a trigger, you can use different components. You can use a calendar, a device, event, geolocation, Home Assistant, numeric state, the sun, time. There are many things that you can actually use. The most common one that you would use is state. So state links to what we talked about earlier. If you skipped along in the video, go watch that part with entities and states if you don't know them already. So states are very common, and also numeric states. These are for those devices that don't have off and on, but have, for example, numbers like a temperature sensor. Once you've selected your type of trigger, you can select the entity ID that you're going to use to track that trigger, and this is going to be specific. So we're going to have an above and below. This is basically greater or less because this is a number. But if I show you the other one, so if you go three dots, you can also delete and disable a trigger. So you go back to scratch. So if we use state, you can see that state will have a from and a to. So the original state that it is to the new state. Then we have a for, which basically indicates for how long the state needs to be in. So to give you a very simple example, motion sensor from off to on, and then for at least 10 seconds. That means that there has been motion for 10 seconds, and it's not false positive, then that will trigger an automation. Okay. Conditions, you can see have and, not, numeric state, or state. So you can add and combine the multiple devices and multiple states to create and logical statements, or logical statements, or not logical statements. And then the actions are pretty much your services. So call service is going to be your most common one. Choose will give you basically a path. So you can do basically like an if and then option. Is sort of similar, right? It's like an if statement. So call service is the most common one used, and these are the same services that you've seen in the developer tools that I showed you earlier. So once you've created your automation, you need to give it a name. I'll suggest you give it quite a good name so you remember what it does, and you can test your automation. To test your automation, you can do it with 3 dots, and run your automation. This will simulate, trigger it actually happening. This is pretty much automation. It's pretty straightforward, and you can really do a lot of things if you understand these concepts. And the more devices you have to Home Assistant, the more you can do. Now let's talk about dashboards. Dashboards in the most simple way are buttons that you can click either with your mouse or your app or your tablet. So to edit a dashboard, you go edit dashboard, and you can see that you can edit cards when they are added in like I have, but you'll probably start with a blank canvas. You have your add card. This will give you all of the possible cards that exist in Home Assistant at the time of recording. These are always evolving and changing. And depending on each, let's say there will be some entities that obviously fit better for certain cards, like an alarm entity would fit really well with an alarm card. Entities are really good to display information like dates. So you can see the examples here to give you a bit of an understanding. And then it's really down to personal preference and choice of how you want to display things. If you go by entity, this will give you, for example, let's say light.elgato. Light, I can select this and I can say continue, and it will suggest a light for me, and I can say add to the dashboard or pick different cards. If I want to pick a different card, I can pick, for example, a button. I can also try and say no, I want to pick a light, and you can see that it's configured in this way. So if I save and I click done, then I am exiting the edit mode. At this stage I can turn off and on the device. I can swivel it to 100% brightness. I can put it back to 24% brightness, and that's how you can simply control lights and lamps. Other devices can be controlled differently. You can have camera streams, you can have fancy images like this GIF over here. You can also add like cards, and you can do many things. Now, if you're interested to learn how I actually built my whole smart home, and you're also interested in how I built these dashboards and a lot of my automations, then I would suggest you check out my lifetime bundle. This lifetime bundle is basically a selection and a library of courses, over hundreds and hundreds of videos that you can actually pick and choose. And these videos are not available on YouTube. They're only available for the community, for my Smart Home Makers community on the website. You can actually purchase individual courses if you want to, or you can pick the lifetime bundle, which will basically give you all current courses and all future courses that will get released to the platform. Now back to the video. Wow, we've covered a lot. You might feel a bit exhausted. I'm happy if at this point you pause the video and you perhaps subscribe to the channel and then come back to it afterwards, but you should try to go out. If you have made up your mind that you want to use Home Assistant, you should try it out and get to this phase again. Get to the point where you have installed it, you've picked your hardware, you've installed it, you've integrated your devices to it, you've created some automations, you've created some sorts of dashboard that you can use with the devices that you've added in, and then you should be really in a good place with Home Assistant. And with the foundational knowledge that you acquired in this video, we are good. But here we're going to go a bit more advanced. We're going to go some rapid fire things that you're going to be doing pretty much soon after you've covered the basics. So go back to settings, and one thing to note are add-ons. So add-ons are extra components that they're basically other software that runs alongside Home Assistant. There are a few add-ons that I use personally. ESP Home, if you're looking to use ESP Home, you're going to need that. File editor is going to be useful to interact with your configuration.yaml, which you will get to use. Previously, it was a must to have pretty much right out of the box. Now it's a bit different. Node-RED is a different way to do automations with flow-based programming, and it's Visual Studio Code, which pretty much is a file editor on steroids, and then Samba Share, which allows your computer to connect to the Home Assistant files. There are many more things that you can do in the add-on store. So you click add-on store and you can see there are quite a few things that you can explore yourself and add. So if you have multiple people using Home Assistant or are planning to use Home Assistant, you can create different profiles. So people here and users. Now people, you can click it by adding add person. You put a name in, put a picture in, and you can toggle if they're able to log in or not. And then you can pick a device tracker to track them. Device trackers normally are the apps, the companion apps that sit on their phones. This will help you doing automations like when people are coming home or not home. Back to the automation tab, there are two things also that are similar that might be useful: scenes and scripts. Now, scripts are automation actions that are repeatable. So these are the things that you are perhaps doing multiple times. You can use some specific code like in this example, or it could just be simply a sequence of actions, like this example here, which is turning a switch on, delaying, then turning a media player on, then doing some command. So you can see that scripts can be powerful. You will naturally find a way and understand when you need scripts. You don't need scripts out of the box. You don't really need to understand what scripts do. You can do everything with automations. But as you graduate to more complex automations, you will use scripts. Scenes are pretty much something like movie scenes, right? So that would be something like, this is how I want the light set when I run a certain scene. When you create a scene, then you can add the scene to your dashboard to control it, or you can add scenes in automations as recipients of automations, basically. So you can say, at sunset, trigger my night scene, okay? So that's good. Under devices and services, there's something else quite useful called helpers. Now you can create a helper by clicking create helper. Now a helper could be a custom button. So you can have something like guest mode, which is something that you set personally. You can have a counter. So this is used sometimes to count how many times the bin has been opened or closed, or your tablet dispenser in your dishwasher. So there's some interesting automation that's been done in the community with these helpers. And you can see that there are quite a lot nowadays of helpers that you can actually create. The helpers act as any other entity. They get an entity ID and they're prefixed by the type of helper. And you can see the input number and input select. So input number will only be a number, and input select is a drop down. As you can see, a boolean is a toggle, so it's basically on and off. So you have different types of helpers that you can set up, but they act in the same way. Entity IDs, you can display them on dashboards and you can use them in automations. It's just that the difference obviously is that devices are real things that have been connected to Home Assistant, and these are like variables and ancillary things that you use to help you do a bit more complicated automations. But it's good to know that you don't really need to do anything at the beginning with them. A little bit of maintenance. So on the system here, you could have your general settings where you can change your time zone. Here you can see if you have any updates for Home Assistant. This is where you'll see your monthly updates from content creators, and you can go and decide to upgrade Home Assistant. You also have your add-ons here when you have them. And when there are updates for the add-ons, you can update them there. Pairs are very useful, so when things go slightly wrong, and these are notices and things are going to be happening, like the Nest YAML configuration is going to be removed. Be aware of that before upgrading. Logs are going to help you debug. Now, you might feel it's a bit scary. Really don't go there if you don't understand what you're doing. Don't worry. But logs basically are there to diagnose issues and to perhaps share them with more knowledgeable people in the community that might help you out. Backups are quite useful to do. This is I would pretty much do a backup as soon as I finished and installing a new system. So you could just create backup, give your backup a name. You could put a password protection if you want. And once the backup's created, I believe you just click on it here, and then you can download the backup to keep it safe on your laptop. I would really recommend that you download the backup once you have it. And then you can also restore, which means if something goes really wrong with your Home Assistant experiment, you can restore a previous version of Home Assistant. But also, if it really goes well and you can't get to the screen and you have to reinstall Home Assistant, but you've got the backup on your laptop somewhere, then instead of starting from a clean canvas, you can just restore a backup. Storage is also something to keep your eye on, because sometimes Home Assistant eats up a lot of storage, depending on if you're using an SD card with the Raspberry Pi or not. Just keep an eye on the storage. The hardware, these are the details of your hardware. And another important thing is restarts, right? So at certain points, you'll be asked to restart your Home Assistant. Restarting Home Assistant, you can do what is called a reload when you are using YAML configurations and a restart. Now, before I leave you, I said I was not going to touch YAML, but I think I have to touch a little bit YAML, because this won't be a complete guide without talking a bit about YAML. The reason why it's at the end of the video, YAML, is because you really don't need at this stage, because Home Assistant got quite good and quite mature. You really need to even know what YAML is to get most out of Home Assistant for the average user. But anyway, regardless, so to get to YAML, you need, as I said, the file editor will just do your code from your add-on store. File editor, you have your folder over here. This is your file system. Now your one could be pretty much different than my one, but you will have something called an automation.yaml file. Here you'll see all of your automations that you're creating in the UI, your configuration.yaml file, and this is where you need to be careful of what you're touching and deleting here, because you might lose things. And you might have other folders, other .yaml folders, but this one is the main one you're going to keep an eye on. And here you can see some of the custom things that I have been adding over the years. Mostly this is because of I'm a content creator and I like to do things like this, but you don't really have to. So yeah, so as I was saying earlier, you can restart Home Assistant and reload parts of Home Assistant based on the YAML files that you have over here. There are other YAML files like scenes.yaml, scripts.yaml, and secrets.yaml. Secrets.yaml is what you use to store your passwords or special API keys that you don't want to share publicly. So if you were to share this YAML file, you can use these secret keys. For example, in this example, I'm connected to Sonoff and I'm using the secret and I'm using sonoff.user, and that will have an equivalent sonoff_user in the secrets file with its actual value. So it will look something like this in the secret file. And then it will be like username. Okay, so as you can see, as I edit it, I get a green check, but I really wouldn't really trust this green check much. But you get this big save button. So anything you do in the YAML here, remember to save, and most likely you're gonna need a reboot, restart, or reload, depending on what you're doing. So this is like YAML and how you can use YAML. As I mentioned, I really don't want you to get stressed about YAML. I don't want you to put you off Home Assistant because of YAML. There are a couple more things also I wanted to talk about. There are new features like media. So if you have media player integrated, you can do some exploring your media connected files and your media cameras connected. There's the Home Assistant Community Store, HACS, which you might get involved in if you want some special devices that you're not able to integrate with the normal integration page. So people will say, go to HACS. This is what HACS is. It's quite straightforward to get set up, to be honest. You don't really have to do it at the beginning. Don't do it unless you actually need something from it. Okay, so let's keep it clean at the beginning. Let's not over engineer this. The history tab is pretty much you being Big Brother. You can actually put a dates parameter and you can find out specifically a device, how that actually changed. The logbook is also going to tell you things like what actually changed in your home and at what point. The map is going to tell you where your entity devices are, so where your device tracker or your people are based on the zones that you created. And then there's also an energy tab if you've been really conscious and have energy monitoring and solar panels. Here's where you can add that in. I unfortunately haven't got that, so I can't really show you much, but here is where you can track your energy. And that completes this Home Assistant guide. We've touched a lot of things. I hope you get value out of this video. If you have, remember to like, comment, subscribe. There are many more videos on the channel where we go in more detail on individual parts, as I mentioned at the beginning. I hope you enjoyed it. Share it on social media if you have. This is the next video here with more automation, Home Assistant stuff. See you in that video. Ciao.